Hi, I'd like to welcome everybody to the Cincinnati Housing Conversation Series. This is a forum that we have put together. A broad coalition of folks throughout the city and the county are working together to bring information to people around the area about important housing issues. This is the third in our series. It was supposed to be about repair issues and code violations, and it was supposed to be in Price Hill, but then COVID came around, and so we decided it's not a good idea to do this live in person, and evictions and foreclosures are a much bigger topic. So we're going to save the Price Hill edition for another time. And so we're going with this recorded version instead. It's a great group of people who put this together, and this series is sponsored by U.S. Bank. My name is Matt Strauss. Some folks may have known me from Madisonville, but I am now a housing policy advocate at the Cincinnati Hamilton County Community Action Agency. And with that, I do want to tell you before we get started about one program that we have related to eviction. We are working on the CARES Act Rent and Utilities Relief Program. So we and Free Store Food Bank and Talbert House have funding for people who are in danger getting behind, or who have gotten behind on their utilities and rent. So if you live in Hamilton County, if your area median income is 80% or less, if your loss of income, and that's either total loss or at least partial loss of income, is due to COVID, and that started after March 3rd, then we are able to help with no more than 3 months of back rent, and we're able to help with gas, electric, and water up to $2,500. So if you are in need, please go to our website and apply. There is a long line, so if you don't hear back from us immediately, that's why, but we definitely want to get you all lined up for that. And that's all I've got. With that, I would like to hand you over to our moderator and get things started. Alicia Townsend comes to us through U.S. Bank, and we do want to thank them for being our sponsors for this entire series, and I want to thank her for carrying us through this panel. With that, take it away, and thank you.
Thanks, Matt. And having safe, decent, visitable, affordable housing is foundational for me. And so it is always a pleasure to be able to show up in support of affordable housing and making sure that we keep people in their homes. We have a powerhouse of speakers that have been called together to speak on this subject of evictions and foreclosures in the wake of COVID-19. We are in unprecedented space right now. And so we need the level of expertise that is present today to help us as individuals navigate this space. And so with great pleasure, I want to highlight the panelists that are going to be speaking today and responding to questions today. And I would ask that as we go through and you respond, that you do also share a bit of your background and your expertise in a given area. So Janice Jones, Executive Director, Housing Opportunities Made Equal. And if you ever need to talk to someone about a landlord issue or renter obligations, I think Janice Jones is one of the people to go to. Sister Barbara Bush, working in neighborhoods. I tell you what, I just try to stay on her good side. But Sister Barbara definitely has one of the premier agencies in working with people in counseling around foreclosures and home ownership. And then Aftab Purvel, who is Hamilton County's Clerk of Courts, who's on the call with us. His office, very future focused, has established a center for evictions within the courthouse, and he will be able to share information about that as well as other things. Steve Sharp with National Consumer Law Center, previously with Legal Aid, can definitely talk with us about legal aspects of foreclosure and mortgage lending and so much more. And then finally, Nick DiNardo, who has been termed the eviction guru at Legal Aid. And hey, I do what I can.
That's a good one.
Who is really a expert and wants to really help us and understand the CDC moratorium on evictions and really getting down to what does that really mean. And so we're going to get right into it. And Nick, I'd like to start with you, and again, have you introduce yourself, share any tidbits that you would like to share, and help us understand, what does that CDC moratorium really mean?
All right. Well, thank you for that. I like to think of myself as the anti-eviction guru, not the eviction guru. But my name is Nick DiNardo. I'm the managing attorney for the Housing and Consumer Practice Group here at the Legal Aid Society of Southwest Ohio. I've been here for about 22 years now, and supervise the work we do in housing and other kinds of homeowner and consumer law type issues. The CDC order came out a little less than 2 weeks ago, and people are calling it a moratorium. And I don't think that's exactly right, because it doesn't stop all evictions. It only applies to evictions for non-payment of rent. So landlords can continue to evict people for lease violations and other types of issues that aren't non-payment. The other thing is, it doesn't stop evictions from being filed for non-payment of rent in the court. What it says is that a tenant must affirmatively give their landlord a declaration that says they meet the requirements of the CDC order, and only then does it basically stay the proceedings for several months. So they're not even required to dismiss the eviction. It really just puts the eviction on pause until sometime in January of next year. So it's not a moratorium, and that it doesn't stop all evictions. And in fact, it requires the tenant to take some affirmative steps in order to get the protections of the order. It's in order to take advantage of the CDC order, a tenant must make less than $99,000 a year, or if it's a couple filing jointly, less than $198,000 a year. For most people facing eviction, that is not at all an issue. The next requirement is that the person must use their best efforts to seek rental assistance. Here in Hamilton County, there are currently several organizations that are offering rental assistance, including Community Action Agency, Talbert House, the Free Store. They all received money under something called the CARES Act to provide a rental assistance to people. And there's other agencies out there like St. Vincent de Paul that may have other sources of funds. So there is money out there. The real challenge we have right now is that there's not enough capacity to get the money out quickly. So there's a large backlog of cases. But the person has to affirm to their landlord and to the court, if an eviction's been filed, that they are making their best efforts to apply for assistance. They don't have to have it yet, they just have to try to get it. The next step they have to take is that they have to try and make affordable payments to the landlord. So that may not be the full rent, but it may be a partial payment, and they have to make some efforts to do that. Part of the reason why is, even while this eviction stay is in place, the duty to pay rent is still there. So the tenant still owes rent for all these months, even if the landlord cannot move forward with an eviction. So it's really important to seek assistance and to try and make whatever affordable payments the tenant can make during this time. The last thing the tenant has to be able to say is that if they are evicted, they'll either be made homeless, or that they'll have to double up in close quarters with friends or family, which would be a major risk under our current COVID situation. So those are the basic elements. The CDC has put out a form declaration that Legal Aid is passing out. I know many other agencies like the Help Center at the courthouse and other social service agencies all have this declaration in one form or another. The key thing is it must be served on the landlord. That's what's required. So the tenant must either hand a copy to the landlord or drop a copy off at the rental office. They should sign and date it, keep a copy for themselves. And then if their case goes to court, they should also file a copy with the clerk's office so that the magistrate or judge who's assigned to the case will know that that's been given out.
Nick,
Alicia,
yes, please.
could I jump in?
Sure.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm Aftab Pureval, Hamilton County Clerk of Courts. Just wanted to emphasize a few things that Mr. DiNardo mentioned. The logistics of this is a little bit confusing out there in the community. So all of his caveats about what this is not, I think is important, but how it actually happens, I think is also important. So if you're a tenant facing an eviction, either you've received a 3-day notice or the eviction has actually been filed, or you think an eviction might be filed, because it's important to know that this affidavit carries weight whether an eviction has been filed or not. The tenant should go to the Help Center website, go to Legal Aid, go to the County Clerk of Court's website, download the affidavit, fill it out, attest to all the elements that Mr. DiNardo just laid out, and then physically hand that to the landlord. At that point, if an eviction has been filed, the burden is then on the landlord to also file that with the court, and a hearing will be scheduled. At that hearing, the magistrate will decide whether or not the tenant's information in the affidavit is true or not. If the judge buys it, then the case, as Nick mentioned, will be stayed until the 31st, December 31st, which is the expiration of the CDC order. If not, if the judge doesn't buy it, then the eviction moves forward as is. So that's the logistics of it. Those are the burden shifting. Now, one thing I did want to emphasize that Nick mentioned was, in no way does this absolve tenants from paying their rent. What we all want to avoid is in January, when the CDC order expires, is mass evictions because tenants have not paid their rent for 2 or 3 months. So early intervention, if you're a tenant with your landlord, early intervention, if you're a landlord with your tenant, to get on some kind of payment plan is critically important to avoid another crisis in January.
Definitely. Sister Barbara, Janice, I saw you nodding in agreement when Mr. Pureval mentioned that this is not meant for tenants to not pay their rent. Can you speak to your thoughts around it and what you might counsel renters on as it relates to, if they go this process, how will they find the dollars to pay the back rent, make payment arrangements? Are there agencies that will help them with those back payments once that starts up in January?
Thanks. Thanks for having me. And to follow what Nick and Aftab both said, I mean, HOME is the fair housing agency here in Greater Cincinnati. Folks call us when they feel that they've been treated unfairly in housing. So that can be something from, a neighbor dispute all the way up until something that rises to the level of illegal discrimination. In the COVID era, we are getting a lot of calls from folks who are having issues making their rent. They've lost income. They've lost the ability to earn dollars. They were already paycheck to paycheck before this happened, and now they're really feeling the punch. And I can't, everybody that I've talked to or I've heard from, really, the first thing we saw when we saw the eviction, prevention halt order, near to quasi moratorium, but maybe not all the way, piece of documentation, we said, but then we had that feeling come over us, and then we said, oh, then what, and the thing of making okay, so January 1st, then what happens? So, we're counseling folks as best we can in the simplest terms we can, that this is not rent forgiveness. You might have seen a hashtag on the internet that said cancel the rent. This is not cancel the rent. This is rent that's going to come due January 1st. And so whatever they can do to try to make some type of arrangement or take, distinctive action to make some type of payment is going to be key, because what, we're going to have, unfortunately, in January is folks that owe thousands upon thousands of dollars in rent. And Nick can probably, tell me if I've missed something here, but it doesn't absolve the landlord from putting on late fees and all, other types of charges that could become due then too. So it's thousands and potentially thousands of dollars in rent that's, that landlord can ask for all at once. And I think that, there's nothing that I've saw that requires a landlord to make a payment plan once January 1st rolls around. They can come and just say, hey, I want to do this eviction and this is how much the person owes me, and I'm going to get a judgment against them, and I'm going to, garnish their wages or whatever to get the money back from them until I get what I get. So, that's one of the things we're concerned about. And, HOME, as the civil rights organization and our emphasis on social justice and equity, we did a study some years ago, a couple years ago, Steve, now I think it's been, where we looked at evictions with legal aid and University of Cincinnati, and came to the resolution that, in that study, the finding was race was more predictive than income when it comes whether or not you're going to be predicted and evicted in certain neighborhoods. So that's only been compounded now by COVID, because we know race is a higher predictor in COVID hospitalizations and COVID mortality, as well as jobs where folks are in high contact positions. So if so the racial implications, the racial disparities related to COVID are key. They were already baked into the eviction question before we got to COVID, and COVID has only put a more, a deeper connection to some of the disparities in housing that we knew existed. And this was something COVID has come along to kind of exploit it to the nth degree. So we're telling people in very plain, very succinct terms that it's not rent forgiveness. If there's any way you can make some kind of payment, that's what you need to get on 100%. Don't sleep on it.
Thank you, Jenny.
The only thing, this is Sister Barb, the only thing I would add is it never hurts for you to call your senators and, either Brown or Portman and your Congress people and tell your story. I don't think they hear stories enough, and they don't know then how important it is to put money out to pay the back rents. And so we need people to call and advocate for yourself. But I think it's so important to tell your story, because your story is why we need to do this.
Alicia, the sister is so correct. Obviously the CDC order is better than nothing, but in addition to all of the shortcomings that Nick and Janice have mentioned, the other half of this is the back rent that is owed. And so if Congress, in addition to the CDC order, could couple that with federally backed emergency rental assistance, that's really the formula to successfully weather this storm. But right now, it's really just a half measure, and not even that, it's really just a quarter measure.
One thing that we've been emphasizing with people, and we've been trying to work both with tenant organizations and with landlord organizations on this matter, is for tenants to communicate with their landlord, let them know what their situation is, offer partial payments where they can, and try and get in line to get some of this assistance. The Hamilton County got a total of $5 million through the CARES Act to do eviction prevention. But the part of the issue is it just takes a while. You have to apply for the funds, do some paperwork, and it can take a couple of weeks to move one of these applications through the various agencies. And so the reason why the CDC order is good is because it does give us some time to work through this backlog of cases, but it's still going to be a real challenge. And while $5 million sounds like a lot of money, it's not going to be enough to help all the people who lost income due to COVID and are now behind in rent. So we need, I think it makes good sense to continue to talk to our state and federal legislators about this issue, because there really is going to be additional funding needed. One thing we haven't talked about yet is that all the shelters are currently full. And in fact, in order to maintain social distancing, we're putting people experiencing homelessness in hotels. I mean, Hamilton County is paying for hotel rooms for people. And so if in January we see a huge influx into our shelter population, it's going to be a disaster. I mean, so we really need to deal with both of these issues, both a stay on evictions, but also emergency assistance for landlords.
Agreed. And I would also want to get into the discussion on what relief exists for homeowners. So we have renters that are having challenges for sure. We have an ever increasing homeless population, nonprofit organizations that have provided housing have seen increased expense because of COVID and the way that they have to go about servicing those individuals. What relief options are there out there for homeowners that are navigating in this space?
So I can start taking that. So again, my name is Steve Sharp. I'm staff attorney at the National Consumer Law Center, where we work on policy issues regarding consumers, especially around home ownership and around, in this case, folks struggling with COVID hardships. For 12 years, I was a staff attorney at the Legal Aid Society of Southwest Ohio, representing homeowners in individual foreclosure cases. So the situation for homeowners is slightly different than for renters. And it involves some kind of technical words that I think are worth going through first. So if you're behind, if you're worried that you cannot make a payment on your mortgage and it's looking like that you're going to fall behind, the most important thing to do, similar to what folks were saying, is to talk to your mortgage servicer, the company taking your payments. The word that and the relief that's out there right now is sort of in two steps. Right now, we have what's called forbearance options for homeowners. And what a forbearance is a temporary pause on your mortgage payments to help you get back on your feet. Like with renters, forbearances do not eliminate the amount of the debt. So you're still going to have to figure out a way to make it up. But what a forbearance does is it minimizes your harm to your credit reporting, and it really puts you on a hold for you to get your ability to get back on your feet. But I think what's most critical or really important with the forbearance is it also gives you a path to, for when you get back on your feet, you've already sort of started that communication with your mortgage servicer, and you can continue on to essentially what you're going to do to finally resolve the problem. So the forbearance gives you that pause. Now, what we have is an unfortunate situation for homeowners where we have sort of a two-part system. So there was a federal law passed in March called the CARES Act. And the CARES Act put the forbearance provisions or these forbearance options in place. But unfortunately, the CARES Act did not cover the entire mortgage market. They only covered what are considered federally backed mortgages, which amounts to about 2/3 of the mortgage market. If you have a loan from Fannie Mae, backed by Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, insured by FHA or any of the other government entities, then you are covered by the CARES Act, and you're actually entitled to forbearance provisions if you have a COVID-related hardship. Problem is, a lot of folks do not know whether they have a federally backed mortgage or not. Often they know if they have an FHA insured loan, they pay FHA insured premiums. Often they know if they have a VA guaranteed loan. For Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, which is the largest portion of what's considered the conventional mortgage market, what you can do is look online. If you Google Fannie Mae loan lookup or Freddie Mac loan lookup, you can actually type in your information and find out if you have a loan that's backed by Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. So what I would say is, if you are falling behind on your mortgage and you need that pause, you should call and ask your servicer for it anyway. Many loan servicers, even if they are not federally backed, are still giving borrowers the option of having a forbearance. It's just if you have a federally backed mortgage, you are entitled to that forbearance. And you're actually entitled to an initial period of 180 days of forbearance, and then an extension for another 180 days while we're still in the pandemic. Again, whether we remain there or whether that stays in place depends somewhat upon whether we continue to have a national emergency. But as of right now, folks are still entitled to an initial 180 days and an extension to a next 180 days. And so I would just encourage people, if they need it, again, not to think it is not a way to eliminate your mortgage payment, but it is a way to get that hold. And unfortunately, and NCLC did an issue brief on this, there's been some early data showing that Black homeowners are less likely to access forbearance than white homeowners. And a lot of people are, according to some self-reported census data, and instead, a lot of people are just falling behind on the loan and not accessing forbearance. And the problem with that is it doesn't give you that pause. But it also, my worry about that is that we're going to have folks, if they're not in forbearance, who are going to miss out on the options for bringing their loan current once they get back in place. So again, it's one of these systematic failures that are really a problem, and something that I think we at NCLC are trying to draw attention to. But as far as folks go, I think it's really important for people to make sure to access that help. Before I get into what the options are to kind of resolve the problem, I'm curious if Janice or Sister Barb or Aftab or Nick are seeing anything else on that.
Let me just say a couple things related, because we are talking to homeowners who are currently not able to pay their mortgage. And there are a couple things that we would tell you, one of which is always call your servicer, but then call Working in Neighborhoods or another HUD certified counseling agency, because there are several things that we can help you do. We can help you figure out what documents you need. We can help you look at your expenses and look at your income and figure out what a budget might look like that would work for you. We can help you to develop a hardship story, because they're going to ask for what is your current hardship? Why can you not pay? The thing we're being told across the board by servicers is that it's very important for people to pay something, because they can, even if they aren't Fannie Freddie, they can then make a case for the people who own your loan. So it's extraordinarily important that we have a good case that explains whether it's your loss of job, it's medical, whether it's a family issue, that we can put that intact so that when you're talking to your servicer, you have the information they're going to ask you for. The other piece is that a HUD counseling agency will also call that servicer with you. And that's one of the things that we've done for years, is help you to understand the process so that you can keep calling them. We're encouraging people to call 90 days, every 90 days, call immediately, and then every 90 days to ensure that things are still in place. I'm not doubting what is in the legislation or in the law, but I know servicers, and I know that the more you communicate, the better off long-term it is. The other piece is, as Nick said, that is temporary. There are some permanent measures that we can do afterwards in terms of a loan modification. And even if you aren't eligible for the current forbearance, you may be eligible for a loan modification. So we'd like to look at both things for you. And that to me is extraordinarily important, because at some point they're going to offer you options. And what we'd like to do is be able to help you think through those options. There is not at this time any cash program that I know of occurring. I think legal aid has a little money to help pay off for mortgage, but not a lot. And so compared to what we see as a possibility, and that 30% are of people who don't have a government-backed mortgage, is really the group we are particularly concerned about, because that we do not know what people will do. We're encouraging all of our servicers to use the federal program for forbearance, but they are not required.
The only thing, Alicia, that I would emphasize is I know that not all homeowners are landlords, but for those landlords who are struggling to pay their mortgage, in addition to forbearance, as Nick mentioned, there's $5 million in emergency rental assistance available. So I know a lot of folks focus on the tenant when it comes to emergency rental assistance, but those checks are made out to landlords, certainly on behalf of the tenants, but that's money going directly to the landlord. So certainly the landlords, homeowners should be aware of that money and make every effort to get it.
Thank you. That's an excellent point to be made. Who out there is assisting renters to navigate the space, complete the forms? I'm hearing that, and I kind of know this, everything is virtual, it's online. Well, there are digital challenges, and everyone doesn't have access to the same level of technology. What other alternatives are out there for those individuals to tap into those resources?
Well, if people are actually facing eviction, if they have court papers, they can call Legal Aid's intake line, which is area code 513-241-9400, and ask for housing intake. That's for either people facing eviction or for foreclosure. They need to go through our intake process. What I can tell you is, much like other agencies right now, we are swamped with calls. And we are trying to deal with as many of these cases as we can. But it's important to call us as soon as you get court papers. We can't promise we'll represent everyone who calls, but we're trying to help out as many people facing eviction and foreclosure as possible right now. We've basically put all of our resources on the housing team into dealing with those two issues right now. We've been able to help people complete applications for several $100,000 worth of rental assistance dating back to June. We're working with partner agencies like Community Action Agency and St. Vincent de Paul to pass out this information. So the best thing to do is to, if you don't have court papers yet, call one of those partner organizations, get in line for rental assistance, and then as soon as you get served with court papers, call Legal Aid immediately and go through our process.
Okay, and I'll just add our Eviction Help Center at the Clerk of Court's office is another intervention and another resource to reach out to even before you're filed, you're served with eviction papers and after. And our Help Center can do two things. Number one, connect you with the partner agencies to get emergency rental assistance. And by the way, the Help Center helps both landlords and tenants. And I know that's true for a lot of our partner organizations, but that's important to note. We'll connect both landlords and tenants to emergency rental assistance, and we'll also provide limited legal guidance so that folks can understand what's going on in their case, get best practices. You know, frankly, Alicia, sometimes we see it as a good result for a tenant to know as soon as possible, as early in the process as possible, that, hey, I don't have any defenses, I'm going to get evicted. It's important to know that as soon as possible, early in the process, so that they can then make alternative arrangements and not be rendered homeless. We see that as a win, and from our perspective as well.
Yeah, and home's situation is a little different. We're further upstream. I mean, like I said, folks call us when they're experiencing issues where they feel they're being treated unfairly. So there may be an eviction looming, or it may be something that, you know, the relationship between the landlord and the tenant has deteriorated, and we need to reinvigorate, re-establish those lines of communication to hopefully head off anything. And there also may be additional issues with the tenancy. So if there was issues with the tenancy before all this happened, now this is lumped onto it. So the tenant comes and says, hey, I have a problem. All these things are going on. Plus, I haven't been able to make my rent. So home can sometimes, work through things like, before the eviction's filed, and to help try to get folks things resolved. We also can refer folks to mediators who work closely with home, who can be an independent third party, come down and sit down with the parties. I say around the table, but now around Zoom, to discuss, what's going on with the tenancy. Is there a way we can work this out? Let's talk through what's happening, because sometimes it's just a missed opportunity for communication that really snowballs things into the effect to where they've got a 3-day, or they know the evictions looming. So we encourage people to communicate with us and let us know what's going on. Let's talk through it. Sometimes we have a relationship with landlords that we can maybe call and act as an in-between to try to get some things ironed out before before things have gone to the point where the eviction is definitely something that is going to happen sooner rather than later.
Thank you, Janice. Janice, are there dollars? Is there support for those individuals? And I know we're in a pause with evictions right now, but what happens to that individual if they get evicted? Then where do they go? Can they go to your agency? Can they go to working in neighborhoods? Where do they go for relief?
Well, if it's a set out situation, and I'm sure Nick and others know this well on the call, I mean, a lot of times it's doubled up with family members. I mean, I think that goes to the heart of the CDC violation. If they have a family member they can go to, that's where they go. Sometimes it's their car. Sometimes it's a shelter. I mean, it's really a matter of people being homeless, especially folks who, we feel, particularly when folks are low incomes, or particularly low income. So we definitely try to refer folks to the homeless agencies here. Strategies to End Homeless has an intake line, and others that can help folks try to do some rapid rehousing. But it is, a matter of homelessness. I mean, that's unfortunately the next step for a lot of folks who don't, can't find a relative to stay with, or a friend, or couch surf for a while. I mean, it's a deeply, destabilizing things. And we've found, down the line, we find that, this impacts children in terms of their ability to stay in school. This impacts people in the ability to get to their jobs. So it's not just destabilizing that particular family, it's destabilizing that family's networks, and, block by block, community by community. It's really a destabilizing factor for folks to years to come. There's been studies that show that people are still having, panic attacks and depression years after being evicted. Years. And this is affecting, children in the household. The children are, more stressed. The mom, the dad are more stressed. So one of those things, and so how, we can't even really quantify that. What is the cost for destabilizing a family that way? So, when I hear about new prevention dollars, when I hear folks that have prevention dollars, I always say, please get in line for those dollars, wait in line, call back, call morning, noon, and night if you have to, because the long-term effects, I mean, I don't think there's been a complete study that's gone out, far enough to see, where folks just kind of bounce back from an eviction because they don't. And it can impact their ability to get housing in the future as well. So it's definitely something that if we can do prevention, it's generational in terms of the impacts.
Janice is absolutely right. And that's why it's so important. I was talking earlier about positive results, about knowing that someone's going to get evicted because they have no defenses as early as possible. It's so important to try and avoid having an eviction on your record because of exactly what Janice is talking about. Similar to a conviction for a crime, that can follow someone for a very long time, making it really hard for them to get housing in the future. So avoiding that situation, leaving voluntarily if you're able to do that, working with your landlord to avoid having an eviction on your record is so critically important.
The other thing I'd add is that it is important to talk to City Council. There is some effort right now to get the city to create a pool of dollars that could allow, on an ongoing basis, even going forward, allow us to be able to pay us the small amount that it takes to pay off that rent. That instead of the large amount it takes, and what I've heard is like you can, for maybe $1,000, $2,000, you can save a family and our local operations over $20,000. So is to benefit us, and there are parts of the country where they do this. And so, I would say advocate to your city council people, to your Hamilton County commissioners, and see if there isn't a possibility of supporting the work of Housing Forward around this issue. And ask Janice, because she's one of the gurus of that.
Oh. Janice, and I was going to ask the question, and anyone can answer this. What recommendations might you all make as it relates to legislative relief, and whether that is related to the CARES Act here in Hamilton County, the city, the state? Are we seeing any best practices in other communities as to the best way to ensure that we stabilize housing and that we stabilize this issue?
Yes, resoundingly yes. So both Columbus and Cleveland are doing really innovative, really progressive things, really creative things. I'll start with Cleveland. I think 2 years ago, and Nick and I talk about this all the time. 2 years ago, they funded City of Cleveland in partnership with the United Way, funded a program that guarantees everyone who matches certain criteria access to an attorney when they're facing an eviction. Similar to Gideon v. Wainwright, that guarantees the right to counsel when you're facing conviction, guaranteeing the right to counsel when you're facing an eviction is just an incredibly creative, progressive way to even the playing field and balance the equities in eviction court, which we all know are incredibly unbalanced. The second most recent, I think just in the last month or two, Columbus and Franklin County, the judges there, I think handed down an order requiring landlords to be in eviction court when proceedings are happening. So another attempt to balance the equities in eviction court. There's other phenomenal ideas, but I think what we desperately need from the federal government is dollars earmarked for emergency rental assistance and help, frankly, making sure that those dollars get into the hands of landlords and tenants as efficiently and quickly as possible.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to say, this is, short, medium, and long range goals, generational goals, mid-century goals is where we need to start thinking, because this COVID may be over, I don't know, mid-year next year, but there's always going to be another issue. There's always going to be another crisis. And as long as these disparities persist, we're going to be in the same, discussion, the same forum, talking about the same issues. So a lot of the things that AFTAB said are key, but having, an affordable housing trust fund locally is key, as well as, issues around housing court. It's important to get some federally based rent assistance at this point. I think I think both, everybody from, the ACLU to the National Apartment Association is in agreement about the need for rental assistance. That's key. And some things that drive wealth. So, I know Sister Barb is the mortgage guru. I'll say that, in terms of how mortgages work. But a lot of this is, being transformative in our thinking around, renting as a way station, as a stopping post to home ownership, especially when it comes to communities of color. Because when you have that wealth, that backing, you have a larger, array or menu of issues and opportunities to try to preserve your housing, when you have a deed and a mortgage. It just is. And so if we can get some folks who we know are calling, these agencies and having, $1,000, $1,100, $1,200 a month in rent, if we can make a way for this to become housing that they own, that will stave off a lot of this in crisis in the future as well. So I think it's a large opportunity to look at, COVID's here this year, what can happen next year? There's going to be the next crisis. And some of these issues are systemic in that whatever challenges come our way are probably going to impact certain communities harder. And, the high amount of renters in our area are African Americans, and they are, of course, seeing this, hit them several different ways in terms of COVID's impacts on their income, their health, their family's health, their jobs, their kids' education, all the things. So I think a comprehensive approach and systemic strategy is needed in this moment.
Yeah, I think Janice is right. And one thing I would say is that we had an eviction crisis before COVID ever struck. I mean, we had 12,000 families, or 12,000 evictions being filed every year in Hamilton County alone. And so we really need to find a way. We know how devastating eviction is for a family, both financially, emotionally, psychologically, hurting children in school. I mean, it's what Matthew Desmond said in his book was it's not a symptom of eviction, of poverty, it's a cause of poverty. So when a family gets evicted, they tend to lose what little wealth and what little belongings they may have had. And so we need to find better ways to deal with these types of situations. So we need to have attorneys for more people in eviction court. We need to have money for people who are just being evicted because of a one-time emergency. It's much more cost effective for us as a society to help that person out then than it is to put them in a shelter for a few months and try and help them start over.
Housing court. Why don't we
Amen.
have a housing court? I mean, it's housing court. So I'll just say that.
I was going to ask why don't we, but we're getting pretty close to the top of the hour, and I suspect that would take a little longer than the time that we have. One thing I am hearing, we still in Hamilton County have CARES Act dollars, correct? And that it is critical that we help to get the word out as to how individuals can access those dollars, correct? And Matt, you were saying that Cincinnati, Hamilton County has resources. Would you like to give that information again and how people can access that information?
Yes, the Community Action Agency has some of this CARES Act money along with Talbert House and the Free Store Food Bank. The best way to get through to us is through our website. We used to be able to do this stuff in person, but not so much anymore. And so please go through our website. If you are not able to do that, if we know plenty of people are having difficulty with digital access, give us a call and we'll do what we can. That definitely get in touch with us through that way. And as has been mentioned, there is a very big, long backlog. It has been taking a few weeks to get to people. Fortunately, I've been seeing that I've been able to, in the cases I've been working with, been able to process them relatively quickly if people get the information back to me quickly. Sometimes that's not easy. And it takes about 2 weeks maximum to get the funds out to landlords and utility companies. We have been we're all working from home. So, people say, where do I fax them to? I say, well, do that. I don't have one of those at home. But people have been taking photographs of their documents. They've been going to different relatives, screenshots of their due bills. People are surprisingly mobile and able to do this. If you can't, there are a lot of the neighborhood development corporations sometimes might be able to help you. Come in and scan stuff for you and send it over to us. But yeah, we're willing to work with you. And the U.S. mail does still work. And sometimes we'll, if all else fails, we'll drop stuff in the mail to you and you can drop it to us.
Thank you. To all of the panelists today, I'd like to say thank you. I think that the information that you have shared is definitely needed. It's invaluable information. I appreciate all of you and the work that you do for the great citizens of Greater Cincinnati, Hamilton County, and the state of Ohio. And just really want to thank you and ask you to keep up the good work and to keep fighting the good fight. Thank you.
And I'd like to thank everybody as well for joining us on this panel. And thank you, Alicia, and thank you to U.S. Bank for sponsoring it. And I want to thank all the folks who have been working together with me to put these together. And please get in touch with anybody on this panel at the information that we'll have on the screen for you if you need any help. And with that, we'll say, since it's recorded, good night, good afternoon, good morning, whatever time you're watching this. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Everybody.